But like for the rest of their life, they're not like showing up to a football game on a Sunday wearing their UCL shirt, even though they're like 65 and the shirt doesn't fit and they're like reliving their glory days, if that makes sense. Maybe some people took that class and realized that actually they did want to study volcanoes for a living. I did not. I took it because I didn't think I could pass any of the other sciences. Hey guys, welcome back to the Girl Gone London channel. If you're new here, my name is Kaylin. I'm an American who's lived in the UK for almost 10 years, and today we are going over the confusing differences between UK universities and US universities. Okay, so if you're new here, make sure to hit subscribe, hit like. Those things help you see future videos of mine, as well as help other people see these videos if you do in fact enjoy them. I do lots of comparison videos between the UK and the US and have lots more planned. So like I said today, I'm talking about the differences between going to what an American would say college, which I'll explain in a second, is not what they say here, but going to college in the US versus the UK. Now, you'll see a lot of videos on this topic, and it's usually like an American who also has a British person that they are talking to about it. I have no British person to talk to about it. I could talk to my husband, but I haven't convinced him to be on camera yet. But I have actually attended university in the UK and in the US, so I am both these people right now talking about my experience. So I am just going to jump right in to the differences, and we'll go topic by topic, because let me tell you, going to university in the UK and working on the British system was one of the biggest culture shocks for me when I first moved here. I had lots of moments of panic and really having no clue what was going on. So for me, I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Pittsburgh. Shout out to Pittsburgh. And I ended up getting my degree from there, but I did quite a few study abroad terms. So for one of those terms, I studied what they call direct enroll at UCL in London, University College of London. And so again, this was about a 6-month term. I was fully immersed in the British system, and they somehow like transferred my grades, even though, as we'll talk about, it's kind of a different system. I also ended up doing my master's degree in the UK as well. Okay, so the first thing to talk about is the language surrounding it. So in the States, we do have colleges and universities, but we call them all going to college. So in the US, if you are designated as a university, it means that you do research, and you could also just be like a college, but they are going to be, in our minds as Americans, basically the same thing. I'm going to college. It doesn't matter if it's actually a university or if it's called a college. It is what happens when you graduate high school and are 18 and apply to go to college. Here in the UK, not so. So here in the UK, they call it going to university or going to uni. Okay, so my understanding of college is like slightly limited in the UK, because obviously I didn't actually go to a college in the UK. So comment below, all of you British people who might have more comments on that. But my understanding is that college in the UK is kind of this in between when you're like 16 to 18. Some people will finish up what they call secondary school at 18, and some people will finish at 16 and decide to go to like a college, but it's not a college in the way Americans think. So just know, college in the US means university. College in the UK does not mean university. So I will use both interchangeably because I'm American, and so I still say going to college, even though I've lived here 10 years. And if that offends you as a British person, I'm sorry, but you can't shake the American out of the American, so here we are. So those are the differences in language. Now, moving on, other practicalities would be like getting in. The systems, obviously, like every university has their own system, but overall here they do something where you get in mostly based on your grades, or what they might call marks on your exams. Whereas in the US, it seems to be a more holistic application. So you could have the best grades in your grade or your year, but if you're not like head of the National Honor Society playing lacrosse and doing all this other stuff, you're probably not going to get into a top tier school. It does seem in the UK that a lot more schools, and also school means something different in the UK, but Americans also use school in reference to university as well. But yeah, it seems like a lot of universities in the UK are more based on your grades. So what would happen here in the UK is you would have predicted results on your exams that you haven't taken the exams yet, but you apply to universities based on your predicted grades, which I think your teachers or some other systems help predict. Maybe your teachers predict it. Again, comment below, British people, because I have not done the up to university part of university here in the UK. But basically, you would say, apply to UCL, say, I'm getting these predicted grades, and they would accept you based on you producing those results on the exams. And so what happens if you don't then live up to what your predicted grades are or to what UCL wants you to get on those final grades, they can then rescind your application, which means that you go into a system called clearing, which is basically where you are not going to the school of your choice because you haven't gotten the grades to get in there. And so universities will open up clearing spaces, which is based on like their incoming class size. And then you'll basically choose another university or apply to another university with your lesser grades in the clearing system. If that kind of makes sense, again, help me below and explain what that is for people who have done that here in the UK. In the US, we don't have a system like that. You apply and you either get in or you don't. You could get waitlisted, but waitlisted isn't necessarily the same as the clearing situation. It's like if the school doesn't have as many incoming freshmen as they thought, and then a space opens up, then they'll go down a list and accept you. But once a college or university says you're in, then unless you like get arrested or something really crazy happens, you're in. So in that way, I feel like I prefer the US system simply because it feels more secure, but those are kind of the differences between actually getting into university. Now, moving on to actually going to university, basic difference here in the UK, a bachelor's degree is typically 3 years. In the US, a bachelor's degree is typically 4 years. In the UK, a master's degree is typically 1 year. In the US, a master's degree is typically 2 years. Now, we can also talk about fees. Fees are very different. Now, university in the UK, people in the UK definitely complain about rising university costs, but that is comparatively to the UK. So I believe the standard fees are like £9,000 a year. In England, Scotland has like a free system. Again, if you're from elsewhere in the UK, comment below, let me know your fee situation. In the US, as you might have heard, fees for going to university can be astronomical. So it could be something like $2,000 a year for in-state tuition in somewhere like a Florida university, or it could be something like $50,000 a year at a private university. So that is a big difference between the two, and definitely something to consider if you're a US student wanting to get a degree. Maybe think of coming to the UK, because even the international student fees in the UK might be less than the fees of going to your US university of choice. Also, you only have to do 3 years, so you're already saving a year. Something to keep in mind. Okay, so you've paid, you've got in, whatever country you're in. What about the actual university experience? And this is where I can really talk about the differences. So first things first, when it comes to the classes that you take in the UK on your 3 years, you are going to have chosen one area to specialize in, and that is going to be all of your classes for those 3 years. So if I choose English, all of my classes for those 3 years are going to be related to English. In the US, that is often not the case. So we have a system where you would declare what we call a major at some point along the lines. A lot of people do it sophomore year, some people do it junior. You can do it freshman year, but you still have to take general education classes in most places. So this means probably out of my 4 years, I took 2 years worth of classes related to my major and 2 years worth of classes not related to my major. And this didn't have to be like 2 years and 2 years. So I would like take 5 classes and maybe 2 would be related to my major that semester and 3 wouldn't. The further you get towards senior year, the more you're specializing. But you can change your major. and you can decide to do something different. That's the positive, I think. I've spoken to a lot of British people who say, you know, I didn't actually know what I wanted to do when I was 18. And not only that, but the exams that you need to take in order to get in based on your area of study, you're going to have to start choosing those when you're like 15 and 16. So to make a 15 or 16-year-old decide what they want to do or what they think they want to do with the rest of their life, I think really creates a system here that can be quite negative for some people who really haven't figured it out yet. Obviously positive for people who know exactly what they want to do. Why waste time studying other things if you don't have to? But I think the American system is more forgiving in that sense and more allowing people to explore. I was what we call a communications major, which was related to public relations and marketing, some English classes, and just the theory of communication. And I took classes such as like sociology. There was something to do with chimpanzees. I remember like having to take a test on the difference between different bones or different like evolution of something like that. I took a geology class. I remember literally nothing, but I took a geology class, and maybe some people took that class and realized that actually they did want to study volcanoes for a living. I did not. I took it because I didn't think I could pass any of the other sciences because I didn't feel like that was my area of expertise, but there's tons of different opportunities to explore in the US system. Again, the flip side is that you might argue, and probably would be right, and that a person who has gone to a British institution when they graduate are more prepared in that field than someone in the US. But again, this is basically banking on the fact that you want to be in that field for the rest of your life. And as we know, when you're 21, 22, 25, 30, however old you are, a lot of people realize that they want to do something else. So weigh in below on your thoughts on the differences between those two, but that was definitely a shock to me. Now, the next difference has to do with attitude. So in the UK, the attitude towards higher education is you have chosen to be here and you get to basically direct your studies. So, I mean, there's so much to cover, but let's just start with basic cultural attitudes. So it's more independent led here. It's self-directed. You came here, you get to decide when to study. I think they said something like I should be spending 10 hours of my week in classes and double that amount of time on my own or triple that amount of time doing independent study. You decided to do this major, you're the one who decides where you want to read around the topic, what you want to research, what you want to read about. In the US, it is not like that whatsoever. You are given quizzes, you are given like read pages 50 to 100 and we'll talk about it. There isn't really that sense of like self-directed education. It might be that you obviously do get to decide what you want to write your essay on, but it might still be something that's approved by the teacher or by the professor. And you're, you know, when you're out of class, obviously you need to do your assignments, but there's not this idea in the US that you should be spending your time outside of class doing this like independent led study, probably because you're too busy at the football game, which we'll talk about in a second. And that brings me to my next difference. So in the UK, there are not going to be a lot of marks or grades to determine your final score in that class. It could be one exam at the end is your entire grade. It could be one paper. Sometimes it might be like one paper and then an exam at the end, or if it's like something in English, maybe you'll have 2 papers that determine your final grade. This freaks Americans out because we are used to having like 26 different things that make up our grade. Maybe the final exam is worth 25%, and all of the homeworks or quizzes or assignments or group things or whatever, they're all for a grade. And so that all leads to your final grade. Whereas in the UK, you're just kind of supposed to spend the year or spend that term studying, learning about things, and you know, you'll have the final exam, but you don't have along the way different things that count for grades. Americans love things counting for a grade. I noticed in myself, even when I was under the UK system, I had such a hard time getting motivated if something wasn't graded, which is pretty terrible when you think about it. But I was just used to a system where it was like, this is what you do. You get the assignment and you do the assignment not because you're interested or because you want to learn, but because you're going to get a good grade. So that would be a downfall of the American system compared to the UK one. Another difference that definitely a lot of Americans don't know is that oftentimes the first year of a British bachelor's degree does not even count towards their final like degree grade, which is insane to us because we are used to things starting from day one, your freshman year. This all counts. Often the first year doesn't even count. It's like pass fail, or like, yeah, I think you just have to like basically pass, but a lot of times it doesn't even count towards your final score. So that's another difference. Now, talking about scores, grading is hugely different in the US versus the UK. The systems are incredibly different. So in the US, we have the grade point average, which we kind of all know in the US, like a 4.0 is an A, 3.0 is a B, and you would be given like a letter grade, and it kind of all comes together to create a letter grade that in some universities can translate to what we'd call your GPA, your grade point average. In the UK, this is not a thing. So they grade based on a system that they say is 0 to 100. They say this, and you're like, okay, 0 to 100. I know what that means. 100 means an A, 0 means I failed, and a whole bunch of stuff in between. You can imagine my surprise when I got back my first paper in my master's degree, and I believe I got a 68. And my professor said, "Oh, great work." And I was like, I cannot believe I'm about to fail out of my master's degree on the first paper. And also, why is this professor being so rude about my grade? Like, why do you have to sarcastically say good work? Clearly, I got a 68 and that's a fail. Well, it's not true here in the UK. And I know people are going to be like, maybe you should research before you go to the UK university. Like, yes, I think there was just a lot to research when it came to going to university in the UK. Somehow the grading system slid right by me, and I didn't realize that the grading was so completely different. It is a 0 to 100 scale in the UK, but I have heard people say, and I think this does depend on the degree you're doing and on the university as well, but in my case, they said, you're not gonna get 100. Like 100 is like you are Einstein and you have just changed the course of the world. They said 80% or an 80 was something that was like so good that it could be published in an academic journal with no corrections, no changes. Then you go down from there. A 70 is amazing. A 60 is really good. Even a 50 is then like good. Whereas in the US system, a really good is like a 95 to 100. So compare that to the UK system on their actual marks and grading. That's definitely something to get used to if you are coming really either side to kind of know what those grades mean. The other thing that they do here in the UK is they refer to their total degree as they give it a mark, which ranges from you get a first, a second, or a third, or a fail, I think. So that was basically like combining all of your grades in all of your classes. And obviously a first is the best. They also separated out the second into what they would call a 2-1 or a 2-2, which a 2-1 is better than a 2-2. So first, 2-1, 2-2, then I believe third, which I'm not sure is also a fail. Like luckily I did not get that low, so I didn't have to worry about that. We don't use that system in the US to refer to what we got on our final degree. Another academic difference between the countries is that here in the UK, even if you do a bachelor's degree, you are usually expected at the end of your degree to do what they call a dissertation. Now, coming from the US, a dissertation is something that PhD students do. I don't want to be a PhD student. So when I heard that there was a dissertation involved, I was like, I think I'm in the wrong class because I'm not a PhD student. Turns out they all do dissertations, and it's basically just a really long end of the year paper where you have to come up with your own research, your own topic. It's pretty involved. It's not just a research paper. You do interviews, you could do testing depending on what your degree is in. But that's something to know if you do come to the UK, that you will be expected at the end of your university career to do a dissertation. Okay, so to end this video, I want to talk about extracurriculars and the differences in social life in between the UK and the US when it comes to going to college. So first of all, the UK students can legally drink pretty much when they step on campus at the age of 18. They've probably been drinking for a couple of years before that. In the US, drinking not legal until you're 21, which makes most college students juniors by then, which means there's a lot of like off-campus shenanigans and various rules in the dorms and in the housing regarding drinking. So I'll talk about drinking culture in a different video, but that is obviously one difference. In the UK, they do have social clubs. So when I went to UCL, there was drama, there were clubs for other interests, but in terms of sports, that is a huge social difference between UK and US universities. So the UK does not have some sort of like college sports system like the US does. So you could be involved in sports at your university, but it's probably going to be a recreational club. Whereas in the US, like people are obsessed with college football. Like everybody, you know, knows college football. Sports like gymnastics have Division I schools, Division II, you know, we've got this whole system, the NCAA. We, as Americans, really believe in sports being a huge part of not just playing, because a lot of people don't necessarily play the sports, but in attending games or supporting your team. And that's just non-existent in the UK. Another thing I would say is relating to that kind of atmosphere around campus. I did not experience a lot of people in the UK having much outward pride in their school. So again, this might be a very British versus American thing, which we'll talk about in another video. But in general, you're not necessarily gonna walk around with like a UCL shirt on. There might be a couple people that you see, I might have like the name of your club on it or something. But in the US, like we collected college shirts. They handed out college shirts to us like candy at all times. We were always decked out in University of Pittsburgh apparel. And that's what you wore to the games, and that's what you wore to really show your pride in your school. I think this idea of like having an alma mater in the US that is just like your ride or die for this school for the rest of your life is such an American concept. Here in the UK, it seems to be a means to an end. Yes, I attended, not me personally, but someone who attended for the full, you know, time might say I had a great time at UCL. I was really glad I went there. But like for the rest of their life, they're not like showing up to a football game on a Sunday wearing their UCL shirt, even though they're like 65 and the shirt doesn't fit and they're like reliving their glory days, if that makes sense. So in terms of the culture surrounding your pride in your school and the outward display of, you know, how happy you are to be a student at that school, definitely not the same in both countries. I mean, most of the people walking around with Oxford University shirts in the UK are tourists. Okay, so that brings me to the end of this video. I hope you followed along and learned something new. If you're interested in more UK versus US videos, leave a comment down below. Let me know your experiences. Make sure to check out the description section where I have loads of resources if you are considering studying abroad in the UK. Like I said, I had a great experience in both countries, but I do still wear my University of Pittsburgh apparel around the house, so what can you say? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.